Over the past week, we've been talking about argument and the right to your opinion. The right to your opinion is the excerpt from chapter one of Jamie White's excellent Crimes Against Logic. And in that book, we start to think about the fact that, argument to a lot of people seems like a contest. It seems like a conflict, and it's easy to escalate an argument past the point of bonding, past the point where two people share an experience of caring really about the same thing. After all, if you're in an argument, you care about the topic, so does the other person. You care about being heard, so does the other person. You care about being right and figuring out what's true, so does the other person. So, in a way, argument isn't really about winning or losing. Argument is about a search for truth. Now, on one hand, that can get tricky because in our culture, it seems like everything has been politicized to the point that it's a matter of controversy. You hear people say things like, I'm going to speak my truth. That phrase is really interesting. Kurt Vonnegut, the famous author, once said, there is no truth. There's only versions on the truth. Well, these ideas are associated with literary genres and schools of thought, like postmodernism. But the fact of the matter is, some things are true, in the sense that we can factually verify them in the world. If I let go of this piece of paper, it's going to fall every single time. That's gravity. You don't want to be that person who's trying to test gravity. I guess you could test it. You could try to prove all of humanity wrong, but you're going to get one chance only, and it's going to be messy. And really, when you think about it, we should be in the business of helping people understand what's true collectively, together, so that if we're talking about the scientific method, if we're talking about climate change, if we're talking about a vaccine for the coronavirus, that we can at least agree that there are components to go into proving a point. Logic, reason, validity, and yes, truth. After all, we should be in the business of making each other better. If a friend of yours is on her way to a meeting or a first date, and she's got spinach in her teeth or toilet paper hanging off of her shoe, what kind of a friend would we be not to tell her and help her improve? Now, to come back to the idea of argument for a moment, a lot of people get emotional when they argue. And it's interesting because our brains have these intricately different functions depending on which area of the brain we're activating. Our frontal cortex is responsible for higher order functions and connections with other people and even animals. The reptilian part of our brain, the brain stem way at the back, is responsible for our automatic functions. It's the reason that you don't have to think about breathing, so that when you're asleep, you keep breathing. Now, the limbic area of the brain is what gets my attention when it comes to argument. Because what happens for a lot of people is that somewhere along the way, they lose their logic, they lose their reason. They start to get emotional. They may raise their voice. They may feel hot and flushed in the face. They may have trouble finding the words to capture and express exactly what they mean in the moment. But it doesn't have to be this way. Some people, because they don't know how to do it, turn it off that is, they wind up getting tired or frustrated and they'll resort to a cliche. Well, they'll say, you're entitled to your opinion, or I'm entitled to my opinion. I think that it's important to pause in this moment because I genuinely respect every single student I teach. Every year. It doesn't matter which class, it doesn't matter which school, it doesn't matter whether we're in a pandemic or a time of plenty. What matters is that each of us are people, and we all have thoughts and feelings that are worth consideration. I value that highly, so I tend to be soft on the people. I also tend to be hard on the ideas, because I don't know a single idea that deserves kindness just because it exists. In fact, I know lots of bad ideas that deserve to be tortured and killed. So, when we're soft on people, we create the kinds of bonds that can sustain themselves through disagreement. I don't have to agree with my friends on everything, but they're still my friends. In fact, my friends and I, to paraphrase Emerson, can afford to be stupid with each other because we're very forgiving. But sometimes we forget. And in those moments, I still value their opinions. I still value their perspectives. After all, some people define themselves through their opinions. You don't hear people saying, I subscribe to the tenets of the Catholic Church. They say, I'm a Catholic. In the same way, they don't say, I believe in the voting agenda of the Republican Party. They say, I'm a Republican. Well, it's easy to offend someone by dismissing their values through dismissing their opinions. So I try to make the middle count. I'm not going to dismiss anyone's opinions, but I'm not going to allow them to be entitled, and here's why. If you're crossing a street and you step off the curb, the light's green, or you're at a stop sign, or even in California, if you're just at a corner, but you're in the crosswalk, you do have a right. You are entitled to cross that street and get to the other side without being run over. It's important at this point to recognize that that entitlement means everyone else is obligated to honor it. Every single car that approaches you has to stop. Doesn't matter if they're late, doesn't matter if they're under pressure, it doesn't matter if they're on their way to the hospital to see their wife give birth, they have got to stop and honor your entitlement to cross the street in one piece. Well, here's a true story. In America, we drive on the right side of the road. So we look to our left to make sure that we're addressing the most immediate source of potential threat. But in England, where they drive on the left side of the road, we have to look to the right as we step off the curb. Well, I was in England, invited to give a talk, feeling a little nervous before the talk, and I was there with a friend of mine who was a university professor, and we were just about to step off the curb. Well, I looked to my right because I knew the traffic was approaching in the left lanes. He was also an American and he forgot. He looked to his left and he didn't see the double-decker bus that was bearing down on him. Now, if he would have said, I'm entitled to my opinion, would I have been obligated to watch him get turned into a hood ornament? I don't think so. So when we have these moments, it's important to figure out how we evaluate what's worth keeping as an opinion and what's worth questioning or even changing our minds about. To start with, I love burritos. It's a simple dish. I know that when that tortilla is handmade with that beautiful masa and those Yukon Gold potatoes are just and the eggs and the green chilies and the jalapenos and the salsa, I'm hungry. I could barely think right now. But there's no way on earth I would ever eat this. If I can't evaluate the difference between a good breakfast burrito and a bad breakfast burrito, well, I'm going to get sick or worse. But when it comes to things I'm not that familiar with, sushi, for example, I don't know. Does that look like a good plate of sushi to you? Maybe if you've never seen sushi before, or if you just go, I don't like sushi in general. But when it comes to things like politics or science or literature, a lot of people have given these things thought. They care. The details matter. And so we have to be able to analyze a craft in terms of the work that's put in so that we can distinguish the good from the bad. Even if I never eat a piece of sushi in my life, I need to be able to tell someone if that's bad sushi, why I'm saying it. If I compare a beautiful piece of sushi that's made by Jiro, star of the documentary Jiro Loves Sushi, a man who left home at 10 years old to make the perfect piece of sushi and hasn't stopped trying since in 70 some odd years. A man who has served presidents and leaders and business leaders in his tiny stall in a Tokyo subway. He would tell you, you've got to have the freshest, most premium ingredients. You've got to have the right rice, the best piece of fish. You've got to have the best seaweed, the best ginger, the best of everything. And it has to be masterfully prepared. It has to be fresh. The knife work has to be perfect. If you're doing a sauce, it has to be a balance between umami or sweet or spicy. The best expression of the ideal with which you set out to create it. Now, when you know those things, and then you look at something like this, you can start to tell the good from the bad. This is garbage. So, when we talk about the right to our opinion, Students every year come to me and say, Dr. Preston, that book sucks. And I think, unless it has lips, no, it doesn't. Well, that book's boring. No, you were bored when you were reading it. Why? If we make a value judgment about a book, we have to be able to look at the details. Just like a fish is fresh or not, a character is flat or round, static or dynamic, interesting or unrealistic. The plot makes sense and builds suspense, or it goes from a Dr. Seuss story to a Greek tragedy to who knows what because the author is confusing us in every paragraph. These are things that we can agree on. We may not go to the same store or even want to buy the same things, but we use the same currency to hold a language in common. And that's where common becomes important. Common sense is the sense we hold in common. And if we can start with that, this year, our study of literature is going to be so much fun because you can come in and disagree with everybody, including me. And there we'll find the search for truth. Thanks for watching. I look forward to working with you this year.